Hi once again, it's Matthew here of Matthew North Music. As I always say at the beginning of my videos, if you like the sort of stuff that I make and you find the things I do interesting, then please think about subscribing to the channel. And also if you think anything I do is of particular interest, then feel free to share my videos on social media, hit the like button and click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of the next videos that are coming up. Anyway, today what I thought I'd do is just a quick kind of review. Few spoilers, I will tell you, there are going to be some spoilers in it, but a quick little, my thoughts really on the new film about Wham. Now, this comes out on Netflix on the 7th of July, I think, here in the UK. And it's had a limited cinema screening, and I saw it in a new cinema here in Plymouth last night called the Everyman. Very nice cinema. Bit pricey, but very nice cinema. One of the nicest cinemas I've ever been to. And they showed the film last night and I watched it and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really well done. The first thing to point out is that a lot of the clips, particularly the TV clips, they do feel like they've actually had some proper restoration work done on them. And they, you know, normally when you see old TV clips in the cinema, they look a bit blurred, a bit soft, a bit wobbly. And a lot of these looked, you know, really good, really sharp. So I was really pleased with that. And they detail the whole history of the band from the start to the end, as you would expect in a biopic. And what was really nice is the whole story of basically two mates. And the fact that when George started school, when he was 11, and he got into the new class and someone said, who wants to look after the new boy? And Andrew originally put his hand up, said, yeah, I will. And that is the start of Wham. I mean, that's such a great story. And there really was such loyalty between George and Andrew. And I think that carried on all the way to when George passed away. But the really interesting bits for me is a lot of the stuff from the early days. The first thing they do is they play a little snatch of a recording of the band that they had before they were Wham, when they were like a kind of a ska band. I've never heard any of these clips before, and the sound quality was actually surprisingly good considering it was supposedly just recorded on a basic cassette player. Then they play some of the clips of Wham's first demo tape. Now, I've always wanted to hear what this sounded like. And it sounded amazing. I mean, the clip of the demo of Careless Whisper, it's not that far from the finished record. It's really, really good. And I just think these tracks, you know, I don't know how complete they are. I don't know if they used any kind of AI demixing or whatever to clean it up. I would suspect they might well have had the original 4-track tape so they could, you know, kind of remix it or whatever. But the sound quality just sounded really good. And I thought, if anything's a contender for a Record Store Day EP, then the Wham demo tape, I think, is an absolute definite because, you know, it's of massive historical interest because, you know, we got this EP, it had like, I think Wham Rap on it, Careless Whisper, and I think it was a section of Club Tropicana. And you think 3 big songs all on a band's first demo tape. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. And then they show some other early clips, and one of them, and I've had to do a little bit of research on this. One of them is a clip, and you see George dancing in Le Beetroot nightclub in London, which is where him and Andrew hung out, and I think it's where they started, you know, trying to get their name around London. And I've never seen it before, and it's, you know, it's way, way before Wham had even, you know, done anything. And I then noticed this clip was actually originally seen in the Soul Boys of the Western World film, the Spandau Ballet film, and it's probably, you know, probably like from some TV news footage or something. But in the Spandau Ballet film, I just looked at a clip of it on YouTube. They don't make any reference to the fact it's George Michael dancing, so they might not have even noticed because at the time he had a full beard, and he doesn't, you know, you can tell it's him now, but at the time you probably wouldn't have noticed. You thought it was just somebody dancing in a nightclub. But I just thought that little clip was actually really nice to see in it. And that's the thing with this documentary. they've got all the archive interviews of George probably ever did relating to Wham. And I'm guessing a lot of Andrew's interviews were new, because obviously he's talking about things in the past tense. But they fit together so well. It's almost like they're both together talking. It's a little bit spooky in places. But the narration all the way through the film, and it is literally just the two voices, is just fantastic. It is just beautiful to listen to them telling their story with real warmth, I think. And then, again, with more archive material, they talk about, well, the whole thing, signing, then how Wham Rap was basically a flop first time round. Then they talk about getting onto Top of the Pops. But before that, they did their tour of nightclubs, because the record had been a flop. They just went to every nightclub and disco around the UK, and they did these personal appearances and stuff. And I don't think artists kind of do that as much these days. I mean, there are still nightclubs around, but you never see, in person, and it's somebody you've never heard of, building up their career. But the thing was, by the fact of them doing that, their stage production, if you like, their dance routines and everything they did got much slicker. And their dance routines were legendary, and their first Top of the Pops performance was absolutely spot on, and that could have only happened because they did these big tours going up and down the country, playing in tacky nightclubs, entertaining people, if you like. The one thing they didn't mention is they talked about Top of the Pops being the big break, but I think they did actually appear on Saturday Superstore like a week before or something, and I think that helped push the single up the charts. So I think Young Guns got to 42, and then they got on Top of the Pops, and then obviously it went top 10, and then they started having hits. But then the story carries on about, they then made the album. I noticed they didn't mention Steve Brown, the producer. Now, I think he should have been given credit, because Steve Brown did a really great job producing the album. And they kind of moved the narrative towards the fact that George then stepped into the production shoe, which he did. But that first album was Steve Brown, and I think Steve Brown should have at least got a mention in it, and he didn't. And I think that's really sad, because, Steve Brown was a brilliant, brilliant producer. And you listen to, one of his greatest recordings was the first version of Electric by The Cult, which has been released since as the Peace album. And it's brilliant. It just sounds so good. It is. It is very of the time, but it just sounds beautiful. And, the albums he did with Balaam and the Angel, they sound fantastic as well. Brilliant producer Steve Brown was. But I think he kind of should have got a mention. But anyway, things canter on. They talk about, flying to Ibiza for the first time to make Club Tropicana video. And then George talks a bit about his personal life out there. So I'm not going to give too much away of all of that, because it's all part of the story. And it just canters on all the way through the history, making the second album. Then they do the Christmas record, which... and then Band-Aid and all of that. And, you can see how much they wanted to have, 4 number ones, and they didn't quite do it. But, it was against Band-Aid. And eventually Last Christmas did get to number 1 anyway, as we all know. But the thing is, there's a lot of really great live footage. Now, to my knowledge, I don't think there's ever been released a Wham concert video, an actual video of live performance. Now, I don't know if there is a full gig that was ever filmed, or if all the live archive was just basically news archive where they just film little bits. But saying that the stuff from the Club Fantastic tour looks great. If a whole gig did exist from the Club Fantastic tour, and they got the original film rushes and they, upscaled them and whatever, I think that would look absolutely amazing. But even if they haven't, if they could literally get all the best live clips and compile it into some kind of live video, that would be really great, because people never really saw them as a live act. But, they had a real top-notch band with them, and they were fantastic performer. I mean, we all know George Michael was an amazing performer, and they do go on to talk about when he performed with Elton at Live Aid, and you know, Andrew was there doing backing vocals next to Kiki D and whatever. But you know, they were a great live act as well, and that's something that's never been, it's kind of been written out of history. But I think that's the same with a lot of 80s acts. You know, Duran Duran were a fantastic live act, Spandau Ballet were a fantastic live act, and apart from things like their Live Aid performances, a lot of people kind of don't know this, or they don't see it, because it was, you know, concert films were never on TV as much as maybe they should have been, other than TV shows like The Tube. And The Tube is actually another point of reference in this documentary, that there are some very good interview clips that Paula Yates did with George and Andrew. And, you know, it's another reminder of what a great journalist Paula Yates was, and the fact she asked good questions and she got great interviews. And if you haven't seen it, there was a really great documentary about Paula Yates on a few months ago. I think it was on Channel 4 or Channel 5. It might be on Catch Up somewhere, but you know, she was a fantastic music journalist, writer, interviewer. And saying it's great to see these clips from The Tube, because The Tube were one of these programs, they would go with a band and they would make a film and they'd show it, and sometimes there'd be 20-25 minute chunks that were shown on TV. Totally unheard of now. But of course, back then, The Tube was a live program, and sticking a 25-minute film in the middle of it meant they could reset the studio from having one live band to having another live band. So I think that was kind of one of the reasons that they did it. But it was great that they did, because we've got this fantastic footage now to look back on, to me, the golden age of pop music, certainly in my lifetime, because 1984, I mean, next year is 40 years since 1984. Every single day next year, you'll be able to find some nugget anniversary of something great that happened in music. Anyway, so the film then canters on. We then get to them touring China, and the fact that something I didn't know is that you know, China kind of broke them in America by doing that. So then they became big in America, and then they do their farewell gig at Wembley Stadium. Now, the Wembley footage, I've only ever seen some ropey, you know, camcordery type footage from Wembley. I've never seen this stuff, and this was like proper film stuff. And it wasn't just one track, it was bits of other stuff then walking out. So I don't know if the Wembley gig was actually filmed in its entirety or not, but if it was, then that would be a fantastic thing to have released. So yeah, this is an 1.5 hour long documentary. It goes by very quickly. You wouldn't think it was an 1.5 hours because there's so much in there. There's no filler in it at all. And it is an absolute joy to watch, and I hope they do a Blu-ray release, because if they do, I will buy it, hopefully with some extra footage, because I want to see it again. And I don't do streaming services, but you know, if you've got Netflix then and you like this sort of thing, you're going to watch it anyway, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. But yeah, that's my little review of it. An absolutely wonderful film, and very nostalgic, very sad in parts and very joyful in others. Definitely worth a watch. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed this little review, and as ever, I'll catch you on the next one.